All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's 7 p.m. exactly. I believe the recording has already started. Welcome to the June meeting of the Public Works Committee for the City of Overland Park. If you'll note that most of the committee's here. I've not heard from Councilmember Farasati, so I assume he'll be joining us in a few minutes. Let's go straight into staff updates. Welcome back, Mr. Hoffman.
Sure. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, good evening. Three fairly short items for a brief update tonight. First, the date for the 2022 governing body construction tour is on Saturday, August 20th, 2022. This will start at the Fleet Maintenance Facility with light refreshments about 8:15 a.m., with a tour starting soon thereafter, lasting till about 11:30 a.m. Staff will work the call-in notice and logistics, but wanted you to know so you can schedule accordingly should you choose to attend. Second, I want to publicly recognize Chris Reese from our maintenance division upon his retirement from the City of Overland Park, which was today. Chris completed nearly 28 years of service to Overland Park, starting in the Parks and Recreation Department and ending in Public Works, where he started in July of 2008. Chris has been a hardworking, dedicated public servant who works and cares passionately about the City of Overland Park, where he lives and grew up, actually. His work ethic and exceptional service has been noteworthy. I just want to wish him the best in retirement. Third, I do want to reiterate the importance of one of the many roles Public Works has for Overland Park. That's the role of Public Works as first responders. 2 weeks ago, an EF1/2 tornado impacted our city. There was damage, as you know, to the city in Overland Park, mainly east of the 95th and Metcalf area, mainly. This activity occurred around 2 a.m. on Wednesday morning during the very early morning hours. Public Works had crews on site before daylight, in particular repairing traffic signal heads that had been torn off at 95th and Barclay, just east of 95th and Metcalf. Likewise, our traffic personnel also responded quickly to get signals operational with generators before power could be fully restored through Evergy. Also, there's a debris portion to that as well. As you know, Parks and Recreation has lead on the debris mission for our city. Public Works is in support, much like Public Works has lead for snow, and Parks and Rec and other departments have the secondary impact mission for that to assist. In addition to restoring traffic flow, our maintenance division assisted Parks and Rec for the next few days, clearing debris and assisting residents prior to the city ultimately utilizing a debris contract that was put in place about 3 or 4 years ago. Public Works plays a vital role as first responder. These are great examples of that. Our crews remain trained and ready, and this preparedness is key to restore services in a quick manner to keep Overland Park residents safe. Likewise, our department maintains positive relationships with police and fire, who traditionally are known as the first responders, building that first responder relationship daily before being needed and remaining ready should we be called to assist. So the Public Works as first responders is an important function, and I want to provide those recent examples, and I would ask each of you to include in our role of educating the public of Public Works as first responders as you meet with residents. We don't do a good enough job in Public Works of explaining that, and I believe it's something that we as a department need to communicate better because we're out there constantly when these things happen. So that's all I had, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. We have a couple of comments. But the Vice Chair would like to make a comment about the emergency the other night.
Tony, I just wanted to say on behalf of my neighborhood, which was one of the areas most affected, thank you to you and your team. I can vouch they were indeed out there from before dawn, whole crews with, I got to see the full suite of Public Works vehicles in action, from little ones to big ones, and they were great, and they were all happy to be there, and we were all very happy to see them. So please pass along thanks from my neighborhood.
Thank you.
And I believe Mr. Healy had something to say.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tony, want to reiterate my appreciation of all our staff that helped with the recent events. I think you're spot on in reiterating that we have a lot of staff that work for the city that are first responders, not only those that are sort of traditionally viewed in that role. And so thanks for pointing that out. I did want to ask, and this was sort of prompted by, we've had past conversations about our traffic safety component, and a lot of times when there's maybe a traffic accident that knocks down a street light or a traffic signal, we're not usually reimbursed for those expenses in the litigation of whatever that accident is. And I'm wondering, in this case, speaking specifically to what Public Works was in charge of, traffic safety, if we have a cost estimate for what this event might cost us, and if there's any chance of reimbursement from the, state or federal level.
Yeah, Mr. Healy, couple responses to that. We have tracked the in-house labor along with Parks and Rec, and Kyle Burns, our emergency management coordinator, is collecting all of that. He probably has it. So I think it's going to be forthcoming to the council on the cost of this particular event. As from the state and federal piece, as you probably know, it really depends on if it's a declared emergency under the Stafford Act. I don't believe it is, but that doesn't mean, I'm not sure what the state is working on that. So we are pretty well versed now in ensuring we are tracking costs not only for the benefit of the public and the governing body, but also in case that we do get federal or state reimbursement. So again, we don't focus on that piece. We focus on the first response piece, but we are educated on the importance of ensuring we know what those costs are. Should we get reimbursement from the state or federal? I do not know that right now. I do not believe we are getting reimbursement from the state or federal. And that really doesn't, it matters greatly, but more importantly, we want to capture the costs for lessons learned and for the public to know that these things aren't cheap. As far as the reimbursement with like traffic signals or lights that get hit, street poles that get hit, it really depends. We do collect some back. I think it depends on the insurance companies. So we do collect some, and that goes back into the general fund. So it's not a total loss, but it really depends on a particular insurance company and things like that. But we don't get it all back, but we do get, I'd say, quite a bit of it back.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony. If there's nothing else in regard to the staff updates, we have in the action items approval of minutes from February. Ms. Cheatham.
I move for approval of the February 23rd, 2022 Public Works Committee minutes.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from February. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Clerk, that's 5-0. All right, and now we're under the main event. We're going to talk about budget. And so, Ms. McDonald, if you'll kick us off, I believe you have a guest as well, so we'll let you take it away from here.
Sure. Tonight we'll be talking about the Public Works budget, specifically related to funds related to Public Works, as well as the operating budget for the Public Works Department, and then changes in the Capital Improvements Program and the Maintenance Improvement Program. However, before I get started, if the chair wishes to recognize, we do have Councilmember Lyons, who has requested to make some comments regarding the budget process.
Certainly. With the mayor not here and the city manager unable to attend, Paul agreed to come make some opening comments, and so many members of this committee have not been through the budget process, so he's not here to tell us how to vote, but just kind of give us the background of how the process works. So, Paul, thanks for coming.
Yeah, I'm just as you indicated, Mr. Chairman, I'm just going to try to, hopefully with some of you being relatively new on the council, and I've been on the council for 15 years and gone through this cycle multiple times. I share the concerns that I've heard some of you all say about how confusing it is, and it can be very daunting to try to figure this out. And I'll be honest with you, when I got on the council, it probably took me 2 years to figure this out after going through this and spending a lot of time with staff to ask a lot of questions and figure it out. And I've seen some correspondence just the last day from Councilmember Cox back and forth with staff. That's exactly the kind of communication. If you have questions that you want to have with staff, sit down with them directly, call them on the phone, send them emails. That's a good way to try to sort out your questions that you have. And so I would encourage you to do that if you can, by all means, do that. If you look at this budget, it's hundreds of pages long. We've got lots and lots of funds in the budget. Some of them are defined by the state law that requires certain funds to be set up a certain way. Some of the funds, and I'll point to like the alcohol fund, for example, you can only spend money a certain way. You can't spend it on any purpose you want. So there's restrictions in terms of how money moves in and out of that account. On the other hand, we've set up other accounts funds that we use for managing, say, the golf course, because we'd like to keep that as an isolated, self-sufficient entity, and so money going in and out of that is used primarily for that purpose. So there's lots of these things going on within the details of the budget. It looks almost like you see certain things being double counted, and Gina can certainly talk to this, but I believe that in fact, in some cases, they are double counted because the state law requires us to account for money in certain ways, and we have to do it the way that they want us to do it. So what I want to do is just take a step back and talk about this at a 50,000-foot level. And at a 50,000-foot level, it's really a pretty straightforward, simple process. We have a bunch of revenue sources coming into the city from all kinds of different places, alcohol tax, gasoline tax, all kinds of things. The bulk, the two main inputs into our budget process are our property tax revenue and our sales tax revenue. Those are the two big items. Those items feed into an operating budget that define the day-to-day operations of our city. And the bulk of that money that's spent in the operating budget, I want to say 80%, Jeannie, correct me if I'm wrong, is really dealing with personnel costs. That's salaries and benefits for the most part. The rest of it's all your average day-to-day, paying the electric bill, buying gasoline for police cars, those kinds of things. We look at an operating budget 1 year at a time. So in this case, we're looking at the 2023 operating budget. By design, the operating budget is intended to produce a surplus. So we take in more money than we actually spend in the operating budget. That money goes into a reserve fund. That reserve fund is an input into our 5-year capital and our 5-year maintenance plan. So as we look at the budget, the operating budget each year, staff estimates what they think the ending fund balance, or I'll say the surplus at the end of that year is going to be for the operating budget, and that feeds into the information for the capital improvement plan and the maintenance plan. And as you know, every year the 5-year capital plan and maintenance plan shift 1 year to the right. So stuff's falling off on the near term and being added on the far term. There is a curve in your budget that shows what the balance that's in our reserve fund is, and if you look at it's the end of the first section, and it's a graph that shows the reserve fund going up, and then it goes down. And every year you look at this, you'll see that the reserve fund is spent down to about a 30% amount. That is the council has set a goal that we always maintain a 30% amount in our reserve fund. So think of it as your savings account. If you wanted to buy a car, say 3 years down the road, you might start putting money in your savings account to accumulate to purchase that car, and then on year 3 you spend the money to buy that car. You could choose to pay cash for it if you have that amount of money in your savings account. You could choose to pay a portion of it in cash and borrow some portion of it, or you could choose to borrow the entire amount. It's exactly the same thing we do from a city budget standpoint. The important thing is, what is our reserve fund at the end of the 5-year maintenance and capital program? And we always want to see that fund get spent down to about a 30% amount. In this case, it shows here 33%. So there's a little bit above our goal of 30% in the case for the 2023 budget. But if you go back 10 years, you'll see essentially the same curve every year. The two main revenue sources that come into the budget, as I indicated before, property tax and sales tax. Property tax is pretty predictable because evaluations go out the previous year. Most of us have received our valuations on our homes, so we know what our property tax is going to be for next year. The county does all that calculation. Right now, they're going through the process of dealing with property owners that have challenged their property tax increase. So that there'll be some minor adjustments that are going to be made to that. But by and large, the city knows what the property tax revenue is going to be for next year. Sales tax can be much more volatile. And some of you who were on the council in 2020 would know that when the pandemic started, sales tax revenue fell off the cliff. And we had to take the city manager had to take very strong actions to adjust the budget in a very immediate way to deal with, I think, a $25 million hole that appeared in the budget. So even though we have a forecast here that our sales tax revenue is going to increase a certain amount between now and next year, keep in mind that could change. And as you read in the media, there's this prediction of a recession that's going to be coming that could have an adverse impact on our sales tax revenue, which would mean that next year the city manager would have to take some action, perhaps to make adjustments to the 5-year maintenance plan and the capital plan to deal with that. To me, one of the benefits of the way we handle this budget process is because we have the 5-year maintenance and capital plan. If something were to happen where we need to make an adjustment to our budget, it doesn't affect our operating budget. It affects the amount that's in the reserve fund, which affects the amount that's going to the capital and maintenance plan. And the good news is that many times we can make an adjustment in the out years to make corrections to adjust for that lower revenue if we go into a recession, for example. The good news is that most residents don't even see that because they don't know that there's a plan for construction of a building in 2026. So staff may go through and they may move that 2026 item to 2027, or they may take it off altogether if necessary. So there's adjustments that this 5-year plan allows us to make without having any impact on the services that we provide year to year. So in essence, then it's a really fairly simple process that we go through. You get down in the weeds, and we can debate the specifics about how much money do we want to go here or go there. But overall, it's a pretty simple process that we look at year to year, and other cities do it differently than we do. But I've always found this to be a pretty effective way of managing our budget from year to year. So real quick, I just want to I print out or listed out some advantages that I see to the process that we have. One is that, as I pointed out, it gives us flexibility to adjust expenses. If it looks like we have some either extraordinary expense that we have or a change in the economy, we can make adjustments to the 5-year plan and not affect the operations budget. It smooths out the up and downs of the economy. So by making those adjustments in the out years in our 5-year plan, we can do those adjustments with basically it's invisible to our residents to see those kinds of things happen, and we can put things in and take things out as we have to make those adjustments to account for the changes in the revenue that comes in. It reduces the need to borrow money. We have this reserve fund that has a chunk of money in it. We can plan for, in some cases, spending cash for those items. I think when we buy a fire truck, for example, we generally pay cash for that. We can choose to borrow the money if we have a large expense, which we do also, but we can manage our debt service to the point where we're comfortable being able to make those expenses, because the more debt service we take on, the more impact it has on our operating budget. And it also allows us to maintain our AAA bond rating so that we can borrow money at lower costs than other cities can do that. So real quick, I guess I wanted to point out one of the things that we see in this budget. It shows that there is a projection that where we will have a surplus or additional revenue $46.8 million for 2023. That is getting spent by a portion of it being spent in the operating budget with the additional resources that we're adding to the operating budget, the salary increases that are projected, that are built in the operating budget. But $33 million of that is being put into the capital and maintenance plan. So we can adjust how we want to do that as we look at this from a council perspective, but that money, it's all got to be accounted for. And the main thing to consider is we don't have a reserve fund that's getting out of control. That money is being spent down and used in a way that the staff is recommending. So I'll leave it at that. I don't know if that helps or not for you guys, but it is ultimately a pretty simple process. It's when you get down in the weeds where things get pretty complicated. Any comments you want to make or anything I might have said wrong, Gina?
All right, Mr. Lyons, thank you for getting us off to a good start.
Yep.
The bulk of this presentation is going to be from Gina. So, Ms. McDonald, thanks again, Paul. If you want to stay for part of this, and
Yeah.
Gina, if you'll walk us through your presentation, and I'm sorry.
Sorry, I'm just trying to understand. Paul was giving us a summary of the budget.
He's given a summary of the process. Use your light if you would, so I know.
Thank you.
That was his summary, and but the bulk of this presentation is Ms. McDonald. She's going to walk us through the specifics of the Public Works budget for 2023. So, Ms. McDonald.
Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to start on the fund section, which is section 4 of your book. Start with the first special fund that is specifically related to Public Works, which is the Stormwater Utility Fund. The total fund is decreasing by about 10%.
Will you use page numbers?
Oh,
please?
I'm sorry. That is on page 42.
All right. So most of us have binders, but not all. But if you'll put it on the screen and give us page numbers,
Sure.
that'd be great.
I will try and remember to do that.
All right. Thank you.
So as you can tell from looking at the fund, really the driver in the change in the total fund amount is related to the beginning fund balance. For the 2022 budget, we were projecting about a $6 million beginning fund balance. For 2023, we're projecting a $3.8 million fund balance. The difference is really how we have our capital and maintenance projects programmed out. 2022 is going to be a large year for capital and maintenance projects to be funded through the Stormwater Utility Fund. Overall revenues in the fund are split between property tax, which we have about it's just slightly less than a 1 mil dedicated property tax in this fund. And then we have a user fee component of that. So the property tax obviously is increasing based on assessed valuation increases. The increase in the user fee really is driven by growth happening within the city. So on the expenditure side, we've got total operating expenditures of about $4.5 million. That's a slight increase over the budgeted 2022 numbers, about a 1% increase. And then we've got, as I mentioned, maintenance and capital improvements are decreasing for 2023. 2022 is a very high year. And then finally, towards the bottom, we've got the reserve for future capital projects, which is really our projected fund balance for the end of 2023. So any questions before I move on to the next fund?
Let me ask the group. You do want to ask questions as we go, and use your light and let me know. Otherwise, you can hold them for the end as well. So I don't see any, Gina, so if you want to keep moving, that'd be great.
Okay, the next fund that I want to talk about is the 1/8 sales tax fund. It's on page 52 of your binder. 1/8 sales tax for street improvements obviously is our 1/8 sales tax. It's a special sales tax that we've had for several years. It is set to expire in early 2024. The current plan is that there would be some type of election for some type of renewal in 2023. So just so you know, in the 5-year planning cycle, we do have this carried out through the 5-year planning cycle, but it does require a vote of the public to extend beyond 2024. Sales tax obviously is increasing. basically same type of increase that we've seen in other funds. We've had we had very good sales tax for 2021. We are anticipating 2022 is going to continue, and then 2023 is also going to continue with the growth in sales tax. So overall, we are projecting the fund to increase about 32%. Most of that is driven by the increase in sales tax. On the bottom half of the page, you can see how the expenditures in this fund are allocated. These are actually all transfers to the projects, but you can see about $10.7 million is allocated towards capital projects in 2023, while $1.6 million is allocated for maintenance improvements. Down at the bottom, we have a transfer to the general fund of $150,000. That is a transfer that we have done since the inception of the fund to support staffing requirements related to such projects. And then finally at the bottom, future capital improvements, that is our fund balance carryover at the end of 2023. If there's no questions, the next fund would be the special street.
Thank you, Jeannie. Please go ahead.
Okay, Special Street and Highway on page 58. The Special Street and Highway Fund is the fund where we receive gas tax distribution. That is gas tax, fuel tax money we receive as pass-through from the state. We've had a fairly stable experience with this fund. The gas tax is a per gallon tax. It's not a percentage tax, so it's actually inversely impacted with when gas prices go up, people tend to drive less, so we would anticipate seeing less gas tax. One other long-term concern we have with this fund is as we see more vehicles using less gas, obviously there'll be less tax collected. So long-term gas tax distribution, while it's been stable, we have concerns about the long-term stability of the fund. I will say that this is one of the primary sources of funding for our street maintenance program. About a third of our street maintenance program comes directly from gas tax. So you can see on the top we've got the gas tax distribution of $5.7 million, and then down at the bottom we are projecting maintenance expenditures of $5 million, which is what is currently programmed in the maintenance program. And then we do have a fairly hefty reserve of $4 million right now that has been growing slightly over the last few years as we are collecting slightly more than we are budgeting. Any questions?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So that was the last of the funds specifically related to Public Works. I will move on to the operating budget. The operating budget for Public Works is in Section 5. It begins on page 124, and we have a few pages that are just a summary I will go through, and then obviously if there's other questions, we can highlight those as well. So on page 124, you see a summary of the total budget for Public Works. The graph on the left shows how the budget is allocated, the operating budget is allocated. About 67% of the budget in Public Works is allocated to personnel services. That's slightly less than normal overall for the city. We do have some large contracts in Public Works. We have contracts for snow removal. We have contracts related to some street maintenance. We have a large amount of money in there for street lighting utility. So we do have quite a bit of commodities and contractual services. Total for commodities contractual services is about 24%, which is higher than you will see in other areas of the city. And then finally, capital outlay. Capital outlay obviously is also a big area for Public Works. They have a large amount of large equipment. Snow trucks, pavers, those types of equipments are paid for through capital outlay in the operating budget. So we have about $2.1 million of equipment that we are purchasing in 2023 in the operating budget for Public Works. Part of that is related to the Stormwater Utility Fund as well. And then the graph on the right, you can see how the funding sources for the operating budget, the Public Works operating budget, is allocated. 80% of expenditures come from the general fund, while 20% come from the Stormwater Utility Fund. Okay, on the next page, a brief comparison of staffing for the Public Works goal area between the 2022 budget and the 2023 budget. You see there's the addition of 3 full-time positions in the 2023 budget, 1 in street engineering and 2 in street maintenance. And I will just skip on to the next page where we have additional information about that on the bottom of page 126. So this shows the budget adjustments specifically related to Public Works for 2023. We have the 3 full-time positions. They include the construction inspector for $100,000. That's 1 full-time employee. The construction inspector we anticipate will allow the city to increase in-house construction observation and reduce future reliance on contract construction inspectors. Construction observation services are usually funded within capital projects, not as part of the operating budget, so you will not see a direct correlation of a decrease in the contract area of the budget to fund the construction inspector. The training and...
Sure. In fact, we have 2. Jeff, if you want to ask your question, and then we'll go to Scott.
I guess my question to that is one, to your answer, which is,
Is your mic on?
As we're going through the process, I'm sort of trying to always, our discussion, I'm trying to get actionable information as opposed to data, right? So am I for hiring someone for $100,000, right? The question I need answered, for me to answer that question is, how much am I going to save on contractors? And if it's more than $100,000, I'll be for it. And if it's less, I might be against it. So to say that you can't find anywhere the savings from that means I'm against it, right? Now, if you can say we budgeted to spend $200,000 less on people because this full-time person can, I mean, how can we not budget that?
So it's budgeted as part of capital projects. So you would see the savings really within the capital projects.
So how much is it?
So I think it was it 260? Is that what I'm recalling?
Yes, it would be about, we said about $250,000 to $300,000 would be the savings.
Right, and Councilmember Cox, we would see that when we bid out the work in an actual project, and we have historical data on that as well from a respect of what an in-house person, and the $100,000 is also not just salary, as you probably know, it's a burden rate and everything else that goes with it. So that's where those savings will come into play.
Right. I'm just saying that that's how the process works, right? You look at this and say, and in fact, I think it was probably my colleague here that maybe prompted this, right? Was to say, why are we spending $220,000 on an inspector for one job when we got our whole person for 100, right? So, and that makes sense, right? But then you should be able to know how much labor it is, how much time, how much they would charge you if you had contracted out, how many of those projects he could do. So you should get like a 3-to-1 return on that, and it sounds like we probably are. So I'm for it, but I mean, I'm just saying as we go through this budget process, with all due respect, Paul, the details matter, right? I understand what the machine looks like, but I need details to make decisions, right? So when we're going to say we want to hire somebody for $100,000, we quantify where else it is and how much it is that we save from that so I can like it or not like it. Is that not pretty obvious? Am I crazy to ask for that? I mean, am I?
No.
Okay,
Jeff,
thank
thanks for bringing it up. In fact, so we can share, Jeff and I had coffee the other day, and he brought that up specifically. He said, are we just ladling in more cost on top, or are we going to have some savings? And I gave him that good old firm answer of, gee, I don't know. So I'm glad you covered that, so thank you very much. The next one was Mr. Mosier, and then Councilmember Farasati.
Yes, I guess my question is, if my understanding is correct, that right now Public Works Department is understaffed, correct?
I guess, Mr. Mosier, I would say we'll staff accordingly to what we have and perform the services according to what the full-time equivalents that we have. I mean,
Well, see,
could we
I
use
guess
more?
here's where my question is leading, is into the contracts. I mean, if we're understaffed, we're still going to get the work done. So are we going to contracts to get that work done?
In some cases, yes. For the example, crack seal, which is done as a preparation method, we do some of that in-house, and given where we're at with labor, we have contracted out crack seal to offset the shortage of personnel, mainly due right now to not being able to hire enough. I mean, we've got FTE full-time equivalents on the books, but like everybody else, we have a labor shortage as well. So then we will seek contractual services to offset that and attempt to maintain a level of service expected to perform our mission.
So how does that relate to the budget? Because I'm guessing contractual services are more expensive. So here we have kind of what Jeff was talking to. Where's our concentration on staffing the department so that we're not paying for those extra services from an outside contract?
Well, part of it is just the position that was just discussed. As a construction inspector, we were paying for contractual services for construction inspectors, so to offset that to the tune of 2.6 to 3 to 1, that's why we sought a extra position for approval, as an example.
Okay, and I understand right now, there's a lot of positions open all across the board, not just with the city, but in private enterprises as well. But, we can save a lot of money, I think, down the road, put that money towards something else that might benefit the citizens of Overland Park if we're on top of that. And I know that you probably are. But it's a consideration, especially in the budget. We're approving a budget that may have contractual services in it or may not. I mean, just depends on where you're staffed at the time, and it's something that we need to look at. So I guess it comes down to the details again. So.
Mr. Mosier, thank you. Councilmember Fairchild, you have a question.
So, Tony, the question that Jeff asked, your answer is only applicable if this position satisfies the volume of the work that $260,000 was buying for us.
Yeah, that's correct,
Right.
Councilmember Farsadi. Sure. And the thing we often have to look at closely is when we bring on a full-time equivalent, what does the workload look like in the out years? And do we believe, and what we can't predict is, in 5 years, will there be a recession or something like that? So we try to do the best we can in terms of what's that projected workload look like to be able to utilize the full-time equivalent that we're asking for. If that makes
so therefore
sense.
you are estimating that one FTE here is going to be working for you to the tunes of 2.6. Therefore, you $260,000.
Well,
because I would, again, I am looking at, am I going to be sitting here in a few months and say, hey, he's overwhelmed, let's sign another, number of external contracts? Because if that would be the case, then we need to think about it right now at the end of the day.
The other thing we try to look at is the historical use of contractual services in the case of a construction inspector and what we've had. But again, we're probably a little bit conservative on that, because what we don't want is if there's a recession and things get cut, then we have a full-time equivalent that's not being utilized appropriately, which we haven't had that happen, but we also don't want to bring somebody on and then have to potentially cut them right after, should there be a recession or something.
Thank you.
Eric, thank you. Gina, if you will, let's move on.
Okay. The next position is a training and safety coordinator. This is in our maintenance area. This consolidates training and safety and management duties with one individual in the department, and includes training and safety related to operations such as snowplow removal, street maintenance, and construction, and it also provides us with an additional snowplow driver. That is $120,000 annually, one FTE. As I said, that's in the maintenance division. The next position is an engineering technician. This is $75,000 annually, and it's one FTE. This position would assist with asset management and infrastructure inventory and assessment, and acts as a backup project inspector. It also acts as a snowplow driver. The first piece of equipment listed here is an asphalt recycler for $190,000. This piece of equipment will increase efficiency and effectiveness in operational street maintenance, especially in the area of patching and repair. And then lastly, we have the single axle dump truck for $225,000. This supports operational maintenance and snowplow operations as the city continues to gain lane miles. So those are the total of $710,000, 3 FTE.
All righty. Thank you. Anybody have any questions? All right, you're doing great. Thanks.
Okay. Next, I just wanted to highlight on the next page, which is page 127, we have a slightly more detailed comparison of the adopted 2022 budget, the 22 estimate, and the proposed budget. You can see we're anticipating that personnel services are increasing 5.9% between the 2022 budget and the 2023 budget. That's mainly due to the addition of the 3 employees, plus adjustments in salary and benefits for current employees. On the commodities section, which is increasing 20.6%, most of that is related to some type of maintenance supplies, especially traffic maintenance supplies and fleet maintenance supplies. Under contractual services, some of the big changes, utilities are decreasing by about 30%. That is related to electricity, streetlight electricity costs. As you will remember, we have done a lot of improvements to streetlights in recent years with conversion to LED and buying the KCP&L streetlights. We are seeing the savings as a result of that. So that allowed us to reallocate some of the utility funding elsewhere. And let's see, repairs and maintenance, it's about 2/3 of the way down under contractual services, is increasing by about $100,000 or 8.4%. And that really is related to increased service contracts and maintenance contracts. So such maintenance contracts as snowplow contracts, those type of the traffic light maintenance contracts, those type of contracts. And then finally, under capital outlay, you can see capital outlay equipment. That is a section that varies year to year. You may recall we have basically a pool of money for capital outlay for the year, and we allocate it out to departments differently each year based on our perceived need within each department. So that does fluctuate year to year. For 2023, Public Works is increasing from about $1.4 million to about $2.1 million. So overall, the total budget, this does include both the general fund and the stormwater utility fund, for Public Works is increasing by 8.4%.
We have a question from Councilmember Cox.
Thank you. So this is going to be a theme, as you know, tonight from the last hour we spent on the phone. Is the increase in the equipment budget because we just have sort of allocated more money to the department, or I know we had one dump truck that we're going to buy, but do we plan to spend another $750,000 in 2023, or are we just trying to build some reserve there?
We actually have specific items that we are purchasing. We're purchasing a replacement, actually 4 replacement snow trucks, I believe, a pothole patch repair truck, a low boy trailer. We have some pickup trucks that are being replaced. And then it actually looks like we have, out of stormwater utility, we have a few more dump trucks. So the dump trucks are what end up being snowplow trucks, and we do try to replace a fairly decent chunk of those each year. Okay. And they are $200,000 to $300,000 each.
Not trying to be difficult, but why did we outline one truck and not the rest of it?
So that is actually in addition to the fleet. So the one truck...
That's an addition versus replacement.
Yes.
Yeah, those,
yes. Okay.
Councilmember Cox, those on page 126, so that would be what we call expanded level packages.
Okay.
With the request for addition, then the annual equipment replacement, which is more than just the Public Works Department, which is a thorough analysis of vehicles, not always based on age, but typically in general about 10 years old. And as the maintenance costs go up for some vehicles, we want to replace them with newer vehicles because it's a tipping point on how long a vehicle will remain ready.
I get the answer is this is new spending. The other is just replacement of existing spending. Got it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's what I had for the operating budget. If there's not any questions, I'll move on to talking about changes in the capital improvements program and the maintenance program.
All right, thank you. Can you tell us what pages you're going to?
Okay, I will start on page 186. Okay. So just wanted to remind everybody that we did not include the entire CIP and maintenance program detailed pages in the budget book just because it's so big. The only ones we did include were changes for the detailed pages, but we do have summaries in both the CIP section and the maintenance section. So we have several pages of summary starting on page 186, and this is based on revenues or resources that go into the CIP. So you can see the different funding sources that are going into the CIP by year. Obviously, funding should match up with expenditures by year. So if we have, in 2023, $87 million worth of revenue coming in, we should have $87 million worth of expenditures going out. So just wanted to remind everybody that those summaries are there. There's several different summaries. There's summaries that are more detailed in terms of year and funding sources. And then we have a summary that is a comparison of the 5-year totals. So that's the funding in the years 22 to 26, which was the plan we adopted a year ago, to the plan we're looking at now. We adopted it for budget planning purposes in April. We're updating it as part of the operating budget for 2023 to 2027. In the capital improvements program, you can see that we have allocated quite a bit of additional money towards projects. The 22 to 26 CIP was $200 million. The 23 to 27 updated CIP as of now is the amount that's requested is $243 million.
Gina, Jeff's got a question for you.
Sure,
CIP.
I'm on page 194.
So what kind of leaps off the page at me is the thing we keep talking about is these transfers. Where are they from? There's $30 million of miscellaneous reimbursement. What in the world is that?
Where are you?
I'm on page 186 or 187. 20 million of it is in street improvements, and 10 million is street lighting thoroughfares. But I'm just saying the source of that, I know what the 1/8 sales tax is, I know what ARP is. Is miscellaneous reimbursement just transfer from the general fund?
No, it's not. It would be, I'm trying to think if we include private as separate, I believe. Let me double check what exactly is included in that $30 million, and I will send you an email. I'll tell you what project it's for and what it's related to.
Gina, can you send that to all of us?
Yeah, I'll send it to all of you.
Where's that 30 million figure? I've seen miscellaneous reimbursement, I think.
So it
You're
is right here in the middle under
Okay.
2023, $30 million
That is, yeah.
miscellaneous reimbursement.
It's 30 million of 87. At the risk of overdoing the details, it's 30 million of 87.
Okay. Are there other questions related to that? I'll get that to you as soon as I can. Okay. After the summaries, we do have some additional fund summaries that are included. Those start on page 198. So this is the 1/8 sales tax improvement plan. This is allocating the revenue that we receive in through the 1/8 sales tax And then you can see how it's broken out per year, programmed both through the CIP program and the maintenance program.
While you're, well, it's still fresh in our mind, there is a footnote, miscellaneous reimbursement of the financing. It's a real broad definition, so I don't think it's going to get to the granular level Jeff's looking for, but it says miscellaneous reimbursement of or other financing refer to sources of funding that are not normally used in the context of the city's CIP planning. Could that be stuff like developer paid and such as that are outside normal funding? Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I believe that's the US 69 reimbursement on a 167th Street project.
$30 million.
Yes.
If you'd confirm that for Jeff and the rest of us, that'd be great.
Yes.
'Cause that's the way I'd always heard it in prior years, was it was outside our normal taxing authority, and that's why I thought developer. But I thought $30 million, that's big, but I didn't think about 69. Jeff, you have your light on. Go ahead.
I don't understand the point. That's a state project, not our project. Or you're saying that's our $30 million contribution to it, which I thought was coming from the toll lane, which everybody's happy about.
No, it was an agreement between the state and the city for, I believe, using express toll lanes from the state to the city in an agreement. So we are the benefactor of that $30 million, and it's linked to the 167th Street bridge over US 69, and also tied to the expansion of Metcalf to Antioch from a 2 to 4 lane.
Just trying to understand. So I keep going back to the same point every time we get into these like tax subsidies with the developers, that our taxpayers aren't paying it because it's a sales tax. Well, I don't know who they think does pay the sales tax other than our residents, but that's who pays it. But in any event, so what you're saying is, as we're collecting these tolls from our residents mostly and other people, the state is going to collect that money and they're going to dump 30 million. It's kind of like this county courthouse deal, right? So the county collects a bunch of tax to build a courthouse and then gives a bunch of the money to us for no reason other than they could get away with it. I mean, I guess we could just get $4 million a year out of it. But so I'm just trying to understand, they're paying us for projects that are largely unrelated to the toll lane and the expansion of 69. I just want to be clear to the public where the money's going and what it's for.
Yeah, Councilmember Cox, I guess what I would say is, as we check that, verify, it's part of the state and local agreement that was approved, I believe. We need to I just want to verify that, but it is an approved agreement. We'll just need to
I'm not questioning the legality of it.
Yeah.
I'm just wanting to understand, once again, I just keep going back to this, the source of the money in government is always the same. It's taxpayers, one way or another, or toll lane payers, right? And so if we're going to take money from them, right, and do something with it other than improve 69, we ought to be transparent about that, right? So if we're going to collect $30 million for our own, I mean, I may be happy to have it, to reconstruction roads and stuff, but expanding Antioch or whatever we're doing has nothing to do with expanding 69. So, I mean, if we're going to get $30 million that we can use for street reconstruction stuff, that's great, but it also means we don't need to collect it from our citizens through property taxes and sales taxes, right? I mean, what I'm saying is, do we have expense of $30 million associated with the expansion of 69 Highway, improving it, and then adding a toll lane? Or is that money available to spend on unrelated stuff?
I can answer that, yes. So for US 69, we've got the express toll lanes. That'll be the addition of the lanes from 103rd to 151st.
Well, they're doing redoing the whole road. They're redoing the whole road. It's not just an expansion, right? They're going to rebuild the whole thing.
Correct.
Yeah.
That'd be correct. A complete reconstruction and an added lane both directions. So the city-state agreement is that the city will contribute $20 million towards that effort. As part of the US 69, there will also be an improvement of 167th Street, and it will also include expanding 167th Street from Antioch to Metcalf. The city's contribution in that agreement is $10 million. So that's where the $30 million come from. The city's contributing them, but the state will basically credit the city through the collection of toll lanes on US 69. So that is our contribution to the project. It will be paid through express toll lanes. So there will be no exchange of money between the state and the city, but it will take care of what is our contribution to the project. So it can only be used for that purpose, for a US 69 and 167.
So where's the offsetting expenditure for that $30 million?
So that's in the capital project that's related to that.
See if I know that number, that particular, I don't know if it'd be in here.
Yeah, it should be listed
Thank
in
you,
the
Lorraine.
summary.
I didn't want to interrupt y'all, but I remembered that there was the initial deal involving the toll lanes, but then when they approached us about what are we going to do with that one-sided interchange at 167th Street, we got additional funding. So this is really money from the state to us to build out our part of that project, which is the east-west thoroughfare associated with their build-out of their expressway.
Correct.
So I think project ST 2799, it's kind of towards the top towards the middle on page 197. It says US 69 Express Lane construction, it's $20.6 million. And then the other half of that project is the first project under thoroughfares, I believe, and that's 167th Street, Antioch to Metcalf, and that's $11.3 million, $11.4 million.
Thank you,
So 20 million is just trading dollars, and 10 million is that's the cost of the interchange, or ballpark.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, Jeff, thank you very much for that. And staff, thank you for clearing that up. Gina, it's back to you.
On page 199, we have our excise tax schedule. So this is the excise tax is money that developers pay when they plat lands. We have an agreement basically that revenue would be used for thoroughfare construction. So you can see how we have that revenue allocated out through 2027. And the balance at the end, we're supposed to be, the balance at the end would be $14,500. Moving on to page 200, we have the county courthouse sales tax. So the county courthouse sales tax, by law, the county did have to share that sales tax with us based on state statute. When that was approved, the governing body made the decision in accordance with the city's fiscal policy that as this is a limited revenue source, it would be used for one-time expenditures, which in our case are really capital and maintenance programs. So we have allocated out that county courthouse sales tax between public safety, parks improvements, and there's some infrastructure improvements included as well. That sales tax does expire in 2027, so after 2027, that will not be a revenue source available to fund projects in the CIP or the MIP. And then, sorry, I just went too fast. Finally, on page 201, we have the current Arpa Plan. Arpa is the COVID relief money that we are getting from the federal government. We received about $9.3 million in 2021. We'll receive another $9.3 million in 2022. The governing body has previously seen the suggested plan for expenditures for this, except for this bottom section in purple, beginning with the 25 to 27 ARPA neighborhood street reconstruction program. The fire station solar roof, we're actually, I think Christy mentioned that, but we are not planning currently to include that in ARPA because after further consideration, we did not feel it would be ideal to use ARPA funds for that. We have an electric vehicle charging master plan, the Arboretum Visitor Center addition of an EV charging, an electric vehicle charging station, and then the Emerald Ash Borer tree remediation project is suggested for $2 million. And not all of those are public works projects, but I did want to highlight just because they are such an integral part of the CIP. Moving on to specific public works projects, I'm going to scroll down, sorry, keep scrolling, to page 206. So this is the new addition in the CIP related to Public Works. It is the, as I was just mentioning, the 25 to 27 ARPA Neighborhood Street Reconstruction Program. This is a new street reconstruction program for $10 million. It would basically be done in 2 phases. The ARPA funding has to be used by basically 25, so we would be doing the first half in 25, and then we'd come back 2 years later and do the second half in 27. It uses $6.5 million of ARPA funds. We also have $1.2 million of 1/8 cent sales tax and $1.1 million worth of PAYGO, which PAYGO is cash that flows from the general fund. You can see both the revenues and the expenditure sides listed on this project.
Thank you. We have a question from Councilmember Cheatham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know that we've talked a lot about neighborhood street reconstruction, and the project that's next in line on neighborhood street reconstruction is a Ward 2 project, the Monitor Square and Briarford Place projects in 2023. And probably everyone remembers a slew of emails we got from residents who were concerned about loss of street trees as part of that project. And we actually, it was reflected in the minutes we just approved earlier tonight that in approving that 2023 project earlier this year as part of the CIP, the chairman and I had spoken, as well as staff, that before we did another street reconstruction project, which would be, there's one already in the budget for 2025, the Wycliffe neighborhood. This would be an additional one kind of running parallel, that we had agreed to talk about ways to, whether there are ways to do better at preserving existing trees as part of those neighborhood street reconstruction projects, and whether we should consider bringing the street tree canopy up to the same site design standards we use for new neighborhoods. So just like we're going in and we're bringing the road up to standard and we're bringing the sidewalks and the street lights and the stormwater, should we also bring the street trees up to our standards for new neighborhoods? Is the chair's understanding that we are still going to have that conversation before this new 2025 project and the one that was already programmed would happen?
I spoke to the city manager, the interim city manager today, and with the IAG coming in, and we're going to be initiating the comprehensive plan. Yes, we do want to work with staff to have those initial discussions and try to figure out really the path forward, so we can bring to light how we approach this, because Tony's team cannot change these programs on the fly after they've already been designed and the contracts let. So we need to have those discussions this fall, this year, because they are going to have big projects they're going to be working on late 23 all through 24, and they'll be doing in 25, both Wycliffe and this new one that is yet to be named. And so we'll have those discussions after budget and new city manager coming on. So it's our intention to give this attention, so we give clear direction to Tony's team and don't change the rules on it.
Great, thank you.
All right, well, thank you.
And staff, question for you, does that match with your timeline that if this project is going to have design happening in 2023, is that correct? That the design would happen in 2023?
Yes, we would start design in 23 through 24, and we would be looking at construction in 25 for that project.
So do we need to make sure that if we're changing any direction, would by the end of 2022 be sufficient time for you to incorporate any change in direction for 2023 design? I just want to make sure we don't run out of time.
I would like to address that, Councilmember Cheatham. If that is going to be the direction, my recommendation would be second quarter of 2023 to have that discussion. We are not finished with the infrastructure advisory group, which has been over a year-long effort for our staff, and just being conscious of our staff with the workload. The other piece is we have a maintenance briefing that is currently it's part of the preparation for the September governing body construction tour. All of those add up on a staff perspective. And the other thing I would suggest to the chair, and probably a discussion with the interim city manager and and new city manager is which departments need to be part of this discussion. To me, and for what it's worth, it is bigger than a public works only piece. And my suggestion to this body would be it's done in a deliberate process. From a timing perspective, should this particular portion of the ARPA go forward, we think in our brief discussions, the city engineer and I, whatever portion Public Works plays, I think there'd still be sufficient time in say early 2023 to have those discussions and still execute that particular project should it be approved. I think
Great.
Lorraine would agree with that.
Yes. Yes, that would be correct. If we are looking at, we thought the second quarter of 2023, probably not past that. That gives us time to incorporate it into the design process.
Great, thank you. And then I think my last question would be for Gina, that if as a result of that, the design changes or the practical changes cost additional money, so like we added $75,000 to the Monitor Square project for new tree planting. If doing this project and planting the number of trees that we require in new neighborhoods, if that required $100,000 additional, would next year's CIP be the time to make an adjustment and change this from a $6.5 million project to a 6.6?
Yes, the next CIP would be adequate for that.
Okay, and with the second, I'm getting my timing mixed up, would the second quarter resolution to those staff conversations be in time for making those changes to the CIP?
They probably would end up, the CIP usually goes to the governing body in January, so it'd probably end up being a spring revision, so we'd be talking about it like a year from now.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. I appreciate everyone's answers on those.
Melissa, thank you for bringing that up. And Lorraine, Tony, my advice is pick a neighborhood with no trees.
Or emerald ash.
If they all have is ash trees. There's a joke in there somewhere. If you'd go ahead and save me, Logan. You have a question?
I wish I had a joke to follow that up. But
go ahead.
I just want to be clear. You're saying the ideal time to start that discussion would be second quarter of next year. So we're talking like March of 2023. When do you need a no/no-go or a go/no-go? What's the deadline for the decision?
We'd probably say by the summer of 23, because we still have time to incorporate any changes that could be reflected through the Neighborhood Street Reconstruction Program.
Because I'm imagining it's not going to take just one Public Works meeting to decide that.
That'd be correct.
All right, thank you.
Logan, say it ain't so. All right, Gina. Anyway, Melissa, thank you for bringing that up and that clarity. And as I mentioned, I did talk to Christy today, and so this is getting attention. We don't know where it's going. I think Melissa and I have had that conversation. This does not mean we're going to be amending our processes tremendously. We just don't know. We're going to do some benchmarking. And, Tony, we want to do this in a manner that it won't derail your team's productivity. And as I know that, as we pointed out, that headcount is kind of scarce, and so we don't want to ladle on yet more responsibility. All right, Ms. McDonald,
Okay.
It's still your shot.
So that was the one change in projects for the CIP. I'm going to move on to the maintenance program. Just like in the CIP, we've got several pages of summaries. I did want to highlight the change in the total maintenance program cost, which I am a little bit on the wrong page for. Sorry. On page 194, you see the totals for the 5-year program. So the adopted 22 to 26 program, I'm sorry, I am still on the CIP. Let's try again.
There. No paper copy. That might help in drawing it.
Okay. Let's try page 216. You see the summary of the totals. So the adopted 22 to 26 maintenance program was $118.2 million. The updated 23 to 27 maintenance program would be about $150 million. And the changes in the program actually begin on page 221. The first project is a project that the committee has already discussed, but I just want to highlight that it is in the CIP, and that is the fuel system maintenance upgrades that was discussed at last Public Works Committee, the May Public Works Committee. The project is increasing in costs by about $565,000, and $450,000 worth of that is pay-go. And then following that, I'm sorry, my computer is not doing what I wanted. I am going to go to page 222, I believe, and that is not either the right one. Let's try 223. Okay, 223, sorry. We have the first maintenance program that we have added additional funding for. As we discussed at the Committee of the Whole, we added $6 million annually to the maintenance programs beginning in 2024. So the 24, 25, 26, and 27 maintenance programs all have $6 million additional. You can see the difference between the previous program, the April program, which was just over $16 million. Now we are just over $22 million. That addition is in the pay-go category, which is cash from the general fund. So increased cost. We did not include 2023 in the increase, even though 23 is the year that that increase would begin, because after discussion with Public Works, there was concerns about the ability to execute an additional $6 million of the program between the time the budget is adopted in September and, we have to let the bids for such program in early 23. So that's why it does not begin until 2024, but it would be in each year additional, and it is specifically related to the increase in property tax that we are anticipating in the 2023 budget. So with that, I believe that's all I had, unless Tony or Lorraine have anything they would like to add. Okay.
Questions, Leanne, Tony? Any other things you'd like to say, and we'll see what each council members' questions they have. Good. All right. Thank you for the comprehensive plan and all the work that's done, Gina and team. So just to expedite, if we just start on one end, I think Jeff's got his light on, and we'll work this way. Anybody that's got questions for staff related to anything we've heard tonight?
So I wanted to make a statement as a question, meaning confirm I'm right or tell me I'm wrong kind of thing. So basically in this 5-year plan, we are increasing the spending on street maintenance over the last 5-year plan budget that we did by about $6 million a year, or $24 million. And we are making a one-time increase in the contribution to street reconstruction of $10 million, part of that paid by ARPA, part of that by other funds. Is that a good summary, the two things that are near and dear to my heart?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So, Tony, two parameters have been brought to my attention actually by members of the public who I always learn from, including Mr. Lancer, who's sitting here, and then verified later. One is that we are $300 million behind our residential improvements, number one. Number two is that we are 50 years behind our stormwater management in terms of what needs to be deployed, which was one of the slides that I saw when IAG was working on it. What I want to ask is, I really am enjoying the surgical view of some of my colleagues on this budget, but my question is going to be much less focused and much more in the big picture of things. If we were talking about a one-year plan, 2023 only, I wouldn't even ask this question, but we are talking about a five-year financial planning. is this mechanism of budgeting, is our priorities, is our way of thinking over this budget. Are we moving to address these two areas? Are these budget at this point and what we are putting on paper and we are putting in front of the residents of Overland Park, it's a deficit, right? We have an obligation that we need money to spend on that. Do we have a way that we are pursuing a solution to close this gap or, to shrink this gap with this? Because the way I understand is that our financial policies on the top, they are in dynamic relationship with what embodies in front of you as a budget at the end of the day. And these two have a two-way relationship. Budget impacts the policies, policies impact the budget back. Do we have a strategy now to, at the end of these 5 years at least, and there are a lot of unknowns. I'm not arguing against unknowns. And there are a lot of pressures on your department. But do you see that we are pursuing a reduction in these deficits, a satisfaction of part of our obligation? Or are we moving on what I refer to as a status quo that might result in enhancement of this deficit? Otherwise, the residential street situation and also this new thing which IAG opened my eyes in terms of stormwater, observing what we have in Deer Creek area and the rest of the city of Overland Park. Is my question clear?
Yeah, it is, Councilmember Farasati. Tough question, but that's good. I would assess it as from the proposal in this 5-year plan of the additional $6 million per year for those years that were outlined by Gina and the ARPA funds. I would categorize it as a start to assist in the long-range maintenance needs of the city. A start. A great start. I'd say great start because and again, it's your this committee's prerogative on where you want to approve a budget or not. So I say it because this has been the proposal to the committee and the council. So I would say assess it as a start in the right direction. I say that because the next 10 to 15 years, and you'll hear this during a future committee of the whole, likely when the infrastructure advisory group recommendations come out on where we are looking and should be looking in the next 10 to 15 years. So this would start that process. It would not, I guess I'll summarize it with that. This would start that process, but there will have to be other financial implications for additions in the future from my perspective and our perspective, our staff perspective, to offset the infrastructure challenges that are occurring long term.
Yeah. And that's very logical. So, and then this investment that we are making is based on two pillars. One is increased property tax collection, and the other one is ARPA. And ARPA will disappear. So, therefore, we are looking at, is it correct to say we are looking at one of the biggest problems of your department based on two parameters that one of them is going to disappear and the other one, God forbid, it could be in a situation that the housing bubble bursts and the collection goes down. I mean, just again, it's very easy for me to come and say everything is going to be fine. I'm just trying to look at a real scenario, a possibility of a nightmare situation.
Sure, Councilmember Farasati. I guess I would answer that by saying I think that's correct. That said, there will be other potential mechanisms for this committee and council to consider in the future. Gina hit on one of those, the 1/8 cent sales tax that sunsets in 2024. And I'm not trying to withhold information, but the infrastructure advisory group will probably be briefing you all on some of those opportunities, potential opportunities to address the long-term maintenance that aren't tied directly to property valuation, and obviously ARPA funds, which will go away.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you. Ms. Cheatham, you're next.
Thank you. This is probably for Tony and Lorraine. Could you talk about the $6 million that we're adding each year starting in 2024 to street maintenance? What would that be used for? What is that going to look like on the ground, and how does that relate to what you heard in the IAG or other?
Absolutely. So first, the $6 million, that's a street maintenance program. In that, we do our street preservation. We do street rehabilitation. That tends to be mill and overlay and UBAS. We also do sidewalk repairs. We have bridge maintenance. We have several things that we do that you see each year in our maintenance program. So, but I would say the bulk of that is our street preservation and rehabilitation. One thing that we know throughout the life cycle of pavement is that we do a very good job of that preservation. You know, every 7 years we are doing our chip seal, and we're trying to keep that road together as best we can to extend that life. What we are not able to hit as well is in the middle of that cycle, we normally want a street to last about 50 years. When we hit that 25 to 30 year, we really want to be doing rehabilitation, mill and overlay, UBAS. That is where those are more expensive than the preservation, and so really we would look at that focus of being able to hit those needs that we just do not have enough money to do. So it helps us to be able to maintain that maintenance cycle for our pavement more on schedule. And so when we see $6 million more a year, that is what our focus would be, being able to hit more of that rehabilitation.
So there are streets that are due for rehabilitation, and they're just not getting it. They're just getting chip seal over and over,
Right.
and this would allow you to add rehabilitation.
It would.
And then we're getting our first infusion of $6 million from the property tax increase for 2023, but you didn't feel like you were going to be able to implement that for 23. So where did the 2023's $6 million go in the budget?
I can answer that. So if you will remember, in the 23 to 27 CIP cycle, we were at ending cash of about 30%. I think it was 30.2%. We're now presenting with ending cash about 32.7%. So the difference between that 30.2% and the 32.7% is basically that $6 million that we did not fund. So it is available, and we haven't allocated out. It's going to be there next year to allocate out, or if somebody has something that really feel strongly about this year, there is a small amount available to allocate out.
If I may, Councilmember Cheatham, I also want to make sure we're not turning down a potential $6 million just because the rehabilitation requires design time, which is the reason why a 2023 for an execution of that sort of maintenance would not be good. It requires quite a bit of prep time to do it. With ADA requirements and everything else associated with it. So I just want to kind of clarify the why on that.
I guess my thinking is I would like to put that money to use for people rather than have the additional fund balance there. So, I don't know if that means instead of 6, it's, $7 million for 6 years, or I can't do the math off the cuff, but could you have your maintenance a little higher? Would you be able to handle that in 24? I'm expecting that the IAG is going to say that even this $6 million additional is not going to meet our needs, like Councilmember Farasati was saying. So I would be interested in putting that money to work for taxpayers sooner rather than later. And if streets is where the council wants to put that, that's great. Everyone knows that I've got lots of ideas about tree planting and things like that, and I'd certainly be happy to put some or all of it towards some of those priorities. But I do think that we could put that money to use more quickly.
Yeah, my only comment on that, Councilmember Cheatham, that it would be that's your and the committee's prerogative for
Would
potential.
your department have the capacity to absorb that if it were 24, if we were to plus it up?
24 and beyond, yes.
And
Yeah, We would think we probably have the capacity, we think both of our staff and contractor capabilities of probably doing about $8.5 million a year in street maintenance. Additional, I'm sorry. Additional $8.5 million.
Okay. Additional
Not total,
to what we're doing
additional,
today.
correct, yes.
Thank you.
All righty. But Gina, to your point, it's in the fund balance. It's, when we talk next year, it's there. If we want to spread it then.
It will be available for future
Okay,
years.
so we're not giving it away.
We are not.
Okay, super. Go ahead if you have another thought, and then
So
we're going to move on to
if we
Scott.
wanted you to put it to work in '24, would you need that to be in this budget cycle? Or could we come back to it next budget cycle and you'd still be able to put it to work in '24?
If we were to implement in 2024, we would start our field work in January through the summer of '23.
Okay.
So the sooner we knew, the better.
Thank you.
All right, then we have Mr. Mosier got a question.
I kind of agree with Melissa on this one, that we put that money aside for future use, but yet we're doing chip seal. And why can't we apply that to our chip seal process and go with a better street maintenance program than chip seal? Because the number one thing that I see and that I still get complaints about, and as I tour neighborhoods and walk them with people, is that the streets are falling apart. They had chip seal done a couple years. They're not safe, but yet we continue to do the same thing, and then we take $6 million, and instead of doing more lane miles the right way, we do it halfway, in my opinion, and nobody's happy with that, and I know most people don't like it, but yet we say that's all we can afford, but yet we're putting $6 million aside.
Mr. Mosier, or Councilmember Mosier, this is where that money would go to a rehabilitation type maintenance, not chip seal in this case. So again, the delay of why not in 23 is the field work that's required for that sort of rehabilitation. So it actually would be going to, so if I wasn't clear on that, I apologize. It would be going to those methods, but we would not be able to execute it until 24, given the field work
I
necessary.
just can't support chip seal any longer. I'm done with it. And anything that comes in front of me personally for chip seal will get a no vote.
We have follow-up questions. Here's Mr. Fersati's second question, and then Ms. Cheatham.
So, Tony, I'm sorry, but you opened the door for my question now. The way I understand it is that your department's strategy and algorithm for chip seal hasn't changed. Otherwise, whatever algorithm you were functioning during the last year and the 210 miles this year, even in the light of $6 million addition, is going to be pursued on June 22nd. We are not talking about IAG. Let's put that out of our mind. Is that a correct statement?
Right now, we're currently utilizing chip seal as a preventive maintenance method.
And so therefore, we are talking about this budget right now with an understanding that pending IAG conversations, all of that $6 million in the year 2024, 25, 6 will be spent with the same algorithm, with the same fellow chart that you have been doing in terms of chip seal.
To be clear, Councilmember Fersati, if it's an additional $6 or $7 million, the additional piece here that's in this budget, we would use for rehabilitation, so not chip seal for that.
So I will get less chip seal per year, and some of my neighborhoods would be set free.
In the case of this, yes, we would add to the rehabilitation utilizing a different method than chip seal.
Would that be in terms of not doing 7 years, or would that be in terms of reducing the number of years that then you qualify for a real treatment? Is that question clear? Right now we have 7 years, right? Usually we do two applications, each one of them for about 5, 6 years, 7 years.
About every 7 years.
So
correct.
would you predict that this infusion of this 6 mile, how would that influence a neighborhood which, is due to get chip seal?
So it's a little bit complicated. It's not simple to answer, and here's why. We have such a backlog of our rehabilitation, in other words, of being able to mill and overlay and UBAS, that we have a lot of candidates that would probably, and a lot of neighborhoods that would probably be able to use a mill and overlay or a UBAS or a rehabilitation method. I prefer to use it in that terminology. So that additional $6 million would allow us to start being able to do more rehabilitation, but we would still need to do chip seal. We chip seal more than we need to in a year because it's better to put something down than nothing and let the street deteriorate. If we have an additional $6 million, we can start to hit those needs at the best time possible for that street. So it will be gradual, but you will see probably, an additional, I don't know, I'm
30 miles less.
30, right, 30, it's kind of somewhere between about 30 lane miles more a year of rehabilitation, mill and overlay, UBAS, any other type of method. And this year you have about 220 lane miles of chip seal. You'll see less, 150 to 170. That will take some time. If we want to continue to eliminate it, though, those are different costs that we would need to talk about to be able to start then slowly eliminating it all. But this is a good start at allowing us to follow our maintenance schedule more to our philosophy.
Thank you.
I don't see any additional questions. If you're ready for a motion, then we can have folks make their statements if there's any. So please, Ms. Cheatham.
All right, I'm going to make
You
a
have a
motion.
Okay.
Here's the motion I'm going to make based on the conversation we just had. I move to recommend to the Committee of the Whole approval of the 2023 Public Works budget and the 2023 to 2027 capital improvements and maintenance programs with the following revision. Allocate the $6 million increase from 2023 increase in assessed value at the rate of $1.5 million per year in 2024 to 2027 to street maintenance repair program. Does that motion make sense to you, Gina, if that were to pass? Okay.
We look at Steve. Is that okay? Does it make sense to? All right, we're going to need a second on that. This is a change from the plan as presented to us. Do we have a second? All right, we have a motion and a second. Let me ask Gina, why did the city manager not spread that $6 million for? And what are we going to? It's my understanding. Whenever you push one side, you get a bulge somewhere else. So what's not going to happen?
I think we should be fairly close to 30%. We'll present that at the Committee of the Whole, obviously, and have that for discussion there.
At the
Committee of the Whole for discussion.
I know there's also been discussion about is there room for changes in the mill levy. I think that might chew that up because this is residing in the fund balance, right? This $6 million is resting in the fund balance.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, we have a motion and a second. We have a number of folks speaking, so let's just do the same thing we did last time. Start on one end. So, Jeff, your thoughts.
So bear with me for a bit. So I don't really have an issue with the expending part of this department, which is what we're here to do. With all due respect to Paul, I have a problem with the process, and I have a problem with the understanding level this body has of the budget, including Paul. So what I'm saying is that we need to start the process with understanding in the aggregate what the tax collections we're proposing in this budget do to revenue, how much of that we're going to spend, and how much additional surplus we're going to create. There is not a fund or a fund surplus. There's about 10 of them. We have transparency in a way that anyone could understand it in an income statement way to one fund, the general fund. And then money gets sent out of that fund like $33 million, and it's called an allocation, right? And it goes to these other funds that don't have either have no sources of revenue or they have less than they need in sources of revenue. We don't get an income statement for all of those funds, right? Like our capital improvement reserve fund, right? We're sitting here looking at an amount of money that we're going to spend, but we don't know what all the sources of revenue are for that, right? The 1/8 cent sales tax, nowhere is that in our revenue for the income statement that I asked Gina, and thank you, Gina, for enduring me, but we're going to get to transparency here. I don't care what it takes or how many people hate me. So what I'm saying is, for us to say, we look at this and say, well, this is how much we're collecting. We're collecting 11% more revenue over the 2022 budget, and we are spending about 5% more in any of the money that we can see. The difference between those two is an increase in surplus. And no one on this body, and in fact no one on staff yet, can answer the question to me, how much is that and where did that go? I think a good bit of that money that we're creating an additional surplus, keep in mind, sales tax, we're just saying that property tax increase is paying for the $6 million a year, right? But it could as easily come from sales tax. Sales tax are going up 18.6%, right? So what I'm saying is, before I'm going to vote to spend any money, any increases, anything, I have really no problems with this budget other than we should have spent all of the ARPA money on streets and roads, except maybe the ash borer treat. The rest of that stuff I would spend it all on this. But I could live with that because we're spending a good bit more and getting a down payment. But and Gina endured me for an hour earlier this afternoon. Until we at least see an income statement, the one I asked her to design, she was kind enough to do, on the general fund, and the same thing on at least the capital improvement budget. This is the money side, the spending side. I want to see the revenue side. Until we can answer to ourselves and to the taxpayers, in 2023, we have all these out-year spendings, but in 2023, how much more money are we collecting? How much money more are we spending? And how much more surplus are we creating, right? We can then decide whether we do or don't want to do that. But the problem now is that every time I try to find surplus, it gets called in the hocus pocus of a government accounting. It's not our people. It's that the government accounting process itself, designed by government people, is opaque. It isn't like GAAP accounting where you can look at something and understand. It is intentionally, I believe, opaque. So we get $32 million transferred out to where? That isn't money we spent. That's money we gave to other funds. But we don't know what that fund surplus was or is going to be. So if we increase the capital improvement budget reserve by $15 million, no one here can see that. It is completely opaque. And none of us have any business voting for a budget when we cannot answer these questions in the aggregate, not just for the general fund. Because we always play the game of we allocate out of the general fund to all these other funds, right? Whether we spent the money or needed it or not. Until we can say, here's how much money we're raising in additional revenue, here's how much we're spending, and here's how much we're increasing our surplus. It's already at 70 million, right, collectively, or 100, or whatever it is. I don't know, because I only see the general fund surplus. I can't see these other 9 surplus funds. Until we know in the aggregate, we are responsible for the entirety of the city. Not just the general fund, but we get given information as we were governing only the general fund and the spending of capital improvements, not the revenue side, right? So I have asked for us to have, very similar to the income statement that Gina produced for the general fund, which the other big fund is capital improvement, or what, I don't know if I'm calling it the right thing, but it's the CIP budget, CIP, MIP, right? So I'm going to guess 90% of the money's there. And the golf course fund and some of that fund, there's no money there. It's rounding errors. It kind of self-sustains, or we give it a little bit of money, soccer field, whatever. But the money is in the general fund and in this capital improvement budget. And I think when we can see all of the money, so the $32 million gets sent out to another fund, to the capital improvement, then I want to see what are all the sources of revenue of that fund, 1/8 cent sales tax, fees, government, whatever, and then here's how much we're going to spend. And part of what the revenue for that fund is we give it money out of the general fund, right? That's a big expense for us, but it's not really an expense. We're just sending it somewhere else. So what I'm saying is, while Paul and certain people may know how the machine works, They have no command of the facts. They cannot answer the questions I just posed. They can't even get close, right? Our staff can't even answer those questions because it's all, no, it can't. We talked for an hour ago. So you answer the question, Paul. How much surplus are we creating in all the funds that we have this year if we approve this budget? How much? How much surplus are we creating in all the funds combined, since you know? Come on up. Come on up and tell me. You're going to sit out there and run your mouth?
We'll have an opportunity during the committee of the whole.
Yeah, you don't have any idea is the answer. You have no clue. You had no clue in the Finance Committee, and you have no clue tonight, so why don't you just sit there? So until I do have an answer to that question, I will not vote for this budget or any other. And what I'm saying is if we change the process where we do know the answer to that question in advance of doing these individual department meetings, then we could maybe come back to the committee as a whole with something to approve. We have the cart before the horse. We do all these detail things, and then we're going to come back to the committee as a whole and talk about whether or not we should raise the mill levy as much as we are or not, right? That's not the time to discuss that. Staff should be giving us, at the committee as a whole, a budget we could approve. And if everybody's sitting here that keeps approving these individual budgets is then going to vote against that unless we lower the mill levy, why are you voting for this budget? The time to vote against to change all that, we need to tell staff to come back to us with a different revenue model if we don't want to raise property taxes 10 or 11%. So this body has no command of this document. Now, I have way more command than anybody else in this body, and I can't answer the question. And until I can, I will not vote for a budget. Then the last comment I'll make, I'll get it all done at one time. The IAG is fine. I'm glad they did their work. I appreciate the work they did. But the answer to the problem, to the $250 or $3 million backlog, is a long-term solution that, in my opinion, has to include bonding, right? So the problem with the whole thing is, at every level that we kick the can down the road, the most expensive stuff to the least expensive, why do we do a lot of chip seal and no road construction? Because chip seal's cheap and road construction's expensive, right? So as you go down the thing, we do less and less. As you go up, we do less of it, right? So if it's a 25 or 30-year solution, and it is, we're not going to give chip seal. You guys, I told you that when we met. It's a long-term project. And if we got a $250 million problem and we spend $10 million a year, right, building more roads, fixing more roads, getting off chip seal, it may take 25 years to get off to fix the problem. It's not going to get fixed in 5, right? But what I like about this budget is, even though we don't have repeating revenue sources to fix it, because we don't have ARPA all the time, we are making a down payment this year to spending the additional that we need to spend every year. We need to find out where that revenue comes from. I want that revenue to come from sources that are dedicated. I would like to see something like doubling the 1/8 cent sales tax, because that's dedicated to doing this. When we just raise taxes on sales tax or property tax, we can run around and spend it wherever we want. It doesn't get dedicated, and taxpayers don't like that, and they shouldn't, because they don't trust us, because we can't answer the questions I just laid out. So I'm just saying, whether IAG does it or this body and staff does it, the solution to that problem is for us to come up with a comprehensive plan, and you guys have got to give us the when and how of how much does it cost to do this, how many lane miles do we reconstruct, how many do we do upgrade, how do we get a glide path off of chip seal, and it may take 20 or 25 years, but we can eat away at it, right? And we can do that with an amount of money. It's going to cost $10 million a year if you got a $250 million problem. It's going to take 25 years at $10 million a year, right? That's just math. But I'm going to insist that we come up with that plan, and then we have a way to fund it. And we can argue about the ways to fund it, right? And maybe it's multiple sources. But I just want to make that comment about the whole AIG and what's coming at us there. And we're going to have to approve a budget this year before that AIG, whatever we agree on to do the long-term work here. But at least this year we did the work. At least we put the money in for this year. Thank goodness we had ARPA. And we should put more in from ARPA rather than the soccer complex, LED lights, and some of that nonsense. But in any event, at least we got $6.5 million. And then we put some other money in. I'll be quiet.
Aaron.
Okay.
You're next.
Thank you. So, okay, first a very fast question. Now, the vote for this item, because CIP and MIP is here, is a vote to finance chip sale, isn't it? It's not operating.
I'm sorry.
I'm saying the vote on this item is a vote to finance chip seal program.
So the CIP and the MIP
Right.
have funding for street maintenance. It does not officially prescribe what's included
Right.
in that.
Right, it's mechanistic free. Okay. So again, my vote is going to be no. I am not going to vote for anything which finances possibility of chip seal. End of the story ever. Okay.
All right,
but
thank you.
I have no problem with the. Just 1 second. I have no problem with the operating portion of it and all these points that my colleague Mr. Cox raises is definitely very valid, and I would very much love to see that summary that he has asked, and that would be eye-opening to me. And that's a great data that we could all look at and analyze. That's one side of it. But I just want to make another 30-second comment, is that our fiscal policies, our financial policies, I think I'm repeating myself for sure, suffers from a chronic disease. And these shortage of funds, these $300 million behind the street maintenance program, 50-year behind the stormwater, these are all manifestations of a chronic disease that has been handed to this department and a couple of other departments because of our financial policies during the last 10, 12 years in terms of tax giveaways, in terms of tips. Now, I am sure that there are arguments that, that they provided such an economic development and, blooming of financial activity in this city that we would have starved to death if we haven't given $230 million to brokerage. Okay? I am sure there would be arguments because my colleagues have expressed it over and over again. But at the same time, I want to put it on record. I feel obligated to put it on record that this profile in front of our eyes, these unfunded duties and obligations tell us that the last 10, 12 years, 15 years of fiscal policy has created problems. So I reject that notion that they are positively balanced and they give us much more than we give out. If that was the case, our city manager in the beginning of Corona did not need to panic for $25 million and fire a bunch of people. So what I propose to you, this is not about a surgical view on this project, is that we all need to think to the testimony of Bill Ebel, our previous city manager, a complete renovation of our thinking, of our fiscal policies, including stopping the obsolete policy of tax giveaways in terms of what we offer to the developers. Overland Park doesn't need it. We have these issues. Our public work department is award-winning. They don't have the budget for it. I always think of them as a Ferrari that we never bring out of garage because we can't put the gas in. They can do the job. They are competent. We need to fund them. Why is it that I'm sitting here and Tony is telling me, with grace of God, in 2024, if I get another $6 million, I'll give you 20, 30 miles less chip seal. Why this procedure didn't start 5 years ago? That's my criticism to this whole thing. I'm glad that we have voices on the council now that are critical, of these issues, and I hope that we change our way. Thank you.
Ms. Cheatham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just echo that I welcome any reformatting and additional formatting of the budget documents to make them clearer to us and clearer to the public, because I also spent about an hour on the phone with Gina this morning getting questions answered in addition to many previous sessions. So I certainly welcome those kind of ideas to help make it easier for us to understand and, more importantly, make it easier for the public to understand. So I'd encourage that, and maybe our communications department might be able to bring some assets to the table in terms of thinking about how to make it understandable. I made my motion really with some of my colleagues who've already spoken in mind. My neighborhood was chip sealed last year, and so I heard some of those same complaints. So I'm put a motion on the table that I think again, does make the situation better in the future, better for the roads themselves, and better for the residents, because there will be fewer people having this. So I'm glad to have had the opportunity to put something on the table that starts to make things better. And we do need to approve a budget, so I hope that my colleagues will join me. Thank you.
Logan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank our staff for putting this together. You all follow the policies that we set as a governing body, and I think you do it excellently. And if anybody has problems with the policies, that's a discussion for the appropriate committee to have at the appropriate time. But I want to thank you, and I know that we receive awards from the relevant associations for our budget documents every year, and that's a priority for us as a city, and I'm glad that we do that because not every city does that. I seconded the motion, and I'm going to be supporting the motion. I know some have talked about a 1 mil reduction in the mill levy, to make up for this $6 million that we're not programming because of timing, really on design. And I would not be able to support, tax relief for people living in $1 million homes. If we want to do targeted relief to the folks that actually need it in our community, I'm wide open to those ideas. But I think Councilmember Cheatham has a good proposal here for use of those funds in the out years, which is going to meet a lot of priorities that have been articulated by this committee and certainly our community. And I think it adds to the down payment. So I'll certainly be supporting the motion, and I know we'll be continuing these conversations, especially as the IEG recommendations come before the council. So the work continues, but I thank Gina and all the staff who took a lot of time putting this together and explaining it to all of us up here. Thank you.
Scott?
I'd just like to say that I hope that the staff doesn't think this is adversarial in any way. Because of the work you've done and everything you've done, you're between a rock and a hard spot. It's darned if you do and darned if you don't. I'm definitely against anything that has chip seal in it because I think it's unsafe. But I also understand that we don't have the money to just redo all the roads, and we need to reconstruct rather than maybe resurface, and I understand that. I don't know where the happy medium is, maybe less lane miles. Heck, we're so far behind at $300 million, where do we start? So somewhere along the line, we have to do it right in the first place, and we have to start it rather than kick the can down the road. It doesn't appease me or the people in Overland Park to just do a little bit, just enough to get by, so they kind of ignore it. This is something that we just have to make a conscious effort that moving forward, we're going to do it right. And we know that UBAS and Overlay lasts longer than chip seal. It's a lot safer, and it's something that they want. And that's something that you hear. And, yes, you'll hear one person say, I don't mind it, but they don't have kids that ride bikes. They don't have trash trucks running down their streets and doing U-turns. So these are the things that I hear on a regular basis. And I understand we don't have the money, but also, too, I think sometimes money gets diverted. And I think that's obvious. And we don't know where that is. I mean, it's just like when we were talking about 1 mil levy for public safety. One of the things that I asked for is let's guarantee that 1 mil levy goes to public safety. And I'm told we can't do that. That goes to the fund, but we can spend that money elsewhere. If I'm going to make a payment of my hard-earned money to public safety, and that's why I supported that 1 mil increase, it should go to public safety. But we don't guarantee that at all, do we? I don't think we do. And maybe we raise the 1/8 cent sales tax, but it goes strictly to maybe getting rid of chip seal. But yet we put that in the contract, and we put that in what we're voting on. I think people would support it. But what happens is that money goes into the budget somewhere, somehow gets diverted, and goes to all kinds of other things that somebody thinks is a priority. So I just think we need to step back, do it right the first time, and move ahead. And this is not anything negative with the staff. Has to do with why are we $300 million behind anyway? Well, somewhere along the line we had a failure, and it wasn't staff. It may have been the council. It may have been the people voting on it. And it's not a negative to any of the council members, because even and I'm glad Jeff brought up this, I read the budget and I just take it at face value, and I learned something here tonight. I missed the $30 million being injected. And I appreciate Jeff for his skills and his knowledge. We all bring different things to the table. Jeff's is financial. Everybody has a talent in what they bring to the table based on their experiences and what they did for a living. And it's all different. So we have to depend on that. And we depend a lot on the staff to do the same thing. And sometimes, in order to get our constituents, the people that put us here, the people that employ all of us, we have to listen to them and sometimes think out of the box. So we need some out-of-the-box thinking. That's what the IAG was supposed to do. And I don't know where they're at yet. I've heard rumors here and there, nothing I can really say. But you know what? We need to work together to think out of the box, decide what we're going to do, and let's just do it right the first time. So we don't have to go back every 2 or 3 years and put chip seal down again because our roads are in such bad shape. And I understand that if we don't cover it with something, the roads deteriorate even further, the base gets hurt, and so then we really run into problems. Sidewalks and all that has to be done. We have to keep, sidewalks and curbing set. I mean, I sent an email, Tony, to you about the dangers on 125th Street where rebar is actually showing through the roadway and the road is being undermined by water. And those are the kinds of things that, yes, we need to fix right away, or it creates problems for the base and people driving. And let's face it, people text and drive. They hit that big pothole, and next thing you know, they're into the curb and we got an accident. So I understand the mountain of work that you have to do. I understand that we have a city staff that is second to none, and I applaud you for that. But somewhere along the line, we got to make a call to quit kicking the can down the road. Let's find a solution, and then let's live with it. That's it. Thank you for everything.
Thank you, Scott. If everybody's done, I'm not going to spend the time to correct anybody. I do want to say hats off to Jeff. He and I visited about this. I do know this is a highly audited fund accounting type budget, and they are different. But I think Jeff's ideas about some simplified, more private sector representations, which will track some of the movements that are required in the fund accounting. Also with that fund balance, which is kind of like retained earnings, is where a lot of the future capital transfers go. And so I think he and I even talked about that. So, but it is goodness, what he's mentioned. And maybe when we get together as the committee of the whole, we'll have that, and it'll make it a lot clearer for everybody. But I do want to tell Gina, thank you. You have built another good budget. It is comprehensive. It is complicated, but it is to standards because this budget is audited, and your books are audited every year by everybody short of the Coast Guard. And so I appreciate the work you do. I also realize that we'd like to have had more money for streets. I have to remind everybody, in case there's folks watching this online, I mean, that's a rather simple exercise. We have way lower tax rate here than any city in the area. So you fund us at those levels, you got tens of millions of extra dollars. And so that's what this leadership has done, is try to get a balance of keeping this rather large network, larger than the adjacent cities, repaired, and keeping taxes low and keeping business attracted. It's a delicate balance, and I think the prior mayor and others and city manager did their magic in order to do that. We're now at a new era, and we may have to have a new paradigm in how we fund street maintenance going forward. I don't think anybody here is was expecting an increase in expenditures above the 6, but that's what Ms. Cheatham is offered. So we're going to be voting on the motion as prepared, but with the additional funding in the 4 out years. So, Clerk, if you would, let's do this on a roll call.
Chair Kite,
I'll vote yes.
Cheatham,
Yes.
Cox,
No.
Farasati,
No?
Healy,
Yes.
Mosier.
That's 3-3. We'll refer this to the Committee of the Whole, and we'll pick it up there and put it all back together.
Sorry, can I make a comment, Chairman?
You had several, but all right.
We'll be very fast.
All right, and know that I may be coming behind you, so go. All right, so go right ahead.
I just want to say, since you mentioned the previous mayor and the administration, I don't know what to call it, but I personally have a criticism to call $300 million deficit in maintenance and 50 years behind the stormwater a very shining history. I personally have my criticism in that. I understand everybody's intentions has been good, but the product in front of me does not meet a gold trophy. That's not what I'm trying to say.
All right, I understand.
Thank you.
I've, like many of you, I've traveled. I think our streets measure up. If you go anywhere else in America, is it what we want? No. If we offer department heads more money, would they like to take it? Yes. We can move the ball. We are large. We're larger than the adjacent cities. And we do have some challenges financially, but there's not a city in the country that doesn't. And so all is not lost, but we do have the right team in order to address that. So with a 3-3 vote, Steve, anything else? All right, we will go on to do the rest of the city's business, and that will first be a city-state agreement in regard to downtown wayfinding. So we have Brian. Brian, welcome.
Thank you. Let's see if I can operate this. Chairman Kite, members of the Public Works Committee, here today to present a city-state agreement for the downtown Overland Park wayfinding signage project. Thought I'd give you a little bit of background on the project with the turnover and the council members. This wayfinding is basically going to be intended to help residents and visitors find their way around downtown, generally if they are pedestrians or bicyclists, slower moving visitors. We will be implementing the project using the regional guidelines developed through the Mid-America Regional Council Wayfinding Signage. Covers most of downtown Overland Park, basically the form-based code area, and approximately 1 to 2 miles out from there on towards some of the bike hike trails. There's $100,000 in TA funds from the feds and $200,000 of PAYGO funds from the city. This is the cover of the MARC Connecting Our Region Kansas City Regional Wayfinding Guidebook, which was produced a couple years ago. We did have, I believe Brian Shields was on one of the committees that helped develop this. We did have local input on the Regional Wayfinding Guide. The next 2 slides are examples of the types of signs that we would be installing. These are straight from the MARC Guidebook. We probably won't get all types of signs. We'll probably get a select number of these and maybe multiple of one type and none of the others. This is the rough limits of the area we will be providing wayfinding. The focus is on the area outlined in blue with some limited signing in the areas outlined in that orangish yellow, more focused on bike routes. We anticipate getting a consultant on in July. We will be selecting from our existing on-call traffic engineering consultants. Construction would begin in 2024. About 18 months of design in there. And part of that is just public involvement, stakeholder involvement, such as Downtown Overland Park Partnership and other stakeholders in that area. You would be able to scale this project to some degree in the future because we would customize the MARC wayfinding plans more towards Overland Park. Again, focuses on walking, biking, transit, and the city-state agreement allows for design and construction using $100,000 in federal funding. With that, I'll open it up for any questions.
Well, it looks like we have Councilmember Cheatham has got a question for you.
Thank you, Brian. As a new council member, I was wondering, is this something that has been in the works as part of, the downtown form-based code and revitalization effort, something that the Downtown Overland Park Partnership has been asking for? What was the genesis of this project?
I'll answer part of that, then I may have to turn it over to Brian Shields. He and I worked on submitting the application for grant funding a couple years ago to Mid-America Regional Council. We had requested $200,000. They awarded us $100,000. The city manager at the time made up the difference to maintain the $300,000. The reasoning behind it, I might look to Brian for that.
Brian Shields, City Traffic Engineer. Yes, the Downtown Partnership has been interested in having some kind of wayfinding signage in that general area for the last several years, and they've been doing other types of activities too, looking at art installations. So this is kind of part of that whole effort to do that type of project in that area.
Great. Well, thank you. I was just downtown today for the farmers market and didn't do much walking because I got a great parking space, but thank you for this effort, and I hope that as part of this, and as we see more pedestrians and cyclists in downtown, that we also think about what other infrastructure investments we can make down there, and if there's changes needed. I know I've heard folks who feel like it's tough to cross some of the streets where there's not a four-way stop. I walked from City Hall to Thompson Park this weekend for the Juneteenth celebration, and that was a bleak walk, actually. So I would just encourage you to keep up the ideas about how to improve our downtown area for pedestrians and cyclists. And I'll be offering a motion to support this. Thank you.
Let's just move down the dais to Logan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a bit in the weeds question, but do we have a good contractor to actually create the signs, the physical signs themselves?
So we were fortunate in that one of our existing on-call traffic engineering consultants has, as a sub-consultant to them, one of the designers of the Mid-America Regional Council plan, being Tool Design Group, who, as you can see, is on the cover of Mid-America Regional Council. So we aren't starting from square one. We're starting from somebody who has the regional aspect of it already down.
Okay. And I sit on our Legacy of Greenery Committee, and I know they were having difficulty finding very similar designed signs for some of our city forests, and they were looking for a vendor. So I don't know how much you ever talked to our city forester, but they might be looking for a vendor if that connection's not already been made.
Yeah, I do talk to Bailey. I know there's some similar signs in Thompson Park already, so Mike Burton, I believe, is familiar with those, who's also in the Parks Department. So we can make connections if we need to.
Great, thank you.
And Scott.
Is this, are these signs just primarily for like the farmer's market or any parks downtown, anything like that? Or are they going to be for private businesses as well?
I think that's going to be determined in the stakeholder discussions. I don't want to point out right at this moment what those locations are going to be. I would say it's fairly safe that Matt Ross, Thompson Park, the farmers market would probably be on the list, but outside of that, that's a bigger group discussion that I can't answer at this moment.
Okay, because just like on the highways, you have the highway sign, McDonald's this way, Wendy's this way, and gas station here and there. That signage is actually paid by the people who put their names on those signs.
Correct.
So I know it was like $1,500 a year for McDonald's to actually put their logo with a little arrow saying go this way when you hit the intersection. This would be something that I think would be good for businesses. But I think they also should pay for that. I mean, I think the downtown area, and I have to admit, until I got on the council, I probably went down there 0 times. I have been to the farmers market now more than once. They have great radishes there, so it's really good. But and donuts, plenty of donuts, so that's good. But yeah, I know they don't go together, but I don't eat them at the same time. But my point being that there's a lot of neat businesses down there that I think would probably want to be on those signs. And I know it's, we're talking about for people that walk and people that ride bikes or maybe even scooters, even driving. Having some directional signage down there in a really nice, attractive way, I think would, one, it would help us get more people downtown, and two, would help pay for some of this if we were going to do that. So just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. If there's nothing else, do you have a motion for us, Ms. Cheatham?
I move to recommend to the governing body approval of City-State Agreement 121-22 with the Kansas Department of Transportation for new wayfinding signs in and around downtown Overland Park, project number ST2542, with an estimated total cost of $300,000 and the city's estimated total cost of $200,000.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a motion and then a second from Mr. Mosier. Looks like Mr. Cox has got a statement.
I may have a surprising comment to my colleagues, which is to say I am a huge fan of downtown OP. I think these unique local vendors, and I think I said in the Finance Committee, the funky vibe that we have down there, that is what makes communities like ours unique and cool, to have different places like that. I know you think I'm a guy out south that would never go down there. I love going down there. And so I also think we have good coordinated efforts to keep developing downtown OP, and there's good momentum there. So this isn't done in a vacuum. And so that's also a part of town that can easily go the other way, and then the next thing you know, we're redeveloping it, right, because it goes dead. So I'm a huge supporter of downtown OP, and I'm going to support this.
There's no other comments. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's 6-0. Thank you. All right. And I believe Becky's next, right? Welcome, Becky. We're going to talk about fuel now, something that's on everybody's mind these days.
Yes. Good evening, committee members. I bring to you tonight the fuel system maintenance upgrades. Gina touched on this on the CIP updates with the increased funding that we discussed last month. This is for the guaranteed max price with the contractor or the construction manager at risk. So the city did select to do an alternate delivery for this project, and it is a construction manager at risk, which was Mega KC was selected for those services. This is for the Blue Valley fuel system replacement construction only. And the guaranteed max price is for this change order is $1,091,724.40. This is the second change order for the project. The first change order was to order the tank in advance. So the total cost of the construction for this project is $1,187,030.65. And I can take any questions at this point.
Super. Does anybody have a question for Becky in regard to our fuel system? Not seeing any. Would you like to make a motion, Ms. Cheatham?
I move to recommend to the governing body approval of change order number 2 for fuel system maintenance upgrades, project number MB 2025 with Mega KC for the guaranteed maximum price of $1,091,724.40 for a revised total contract amount of $1,187,030.65.
Do you have a second? We got several. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That carries as well. All righty. Let's move on. And are we going to be going back to going to Brent? Brent, how are you?
I'm doing good, thank you. Although it is coming up on my bedtime, so. I'm sorry?
Well, we can.
This is early for us. Some of our meetings have gone pretty long this year.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I have several items for y'all's consideration tonight. The first one is supplemental agreement number 2 with the Kansas Department of Transportation. It's to the city-state agreement 13519. This is for the 91st Street Trail, pedestrian trail that is under construction right now. The project includes, it's a bike hike trail from 91st Terrace and along 91st Street from Lowell to Knoll. It includes curb replacements, new ADA ramps, the trail. We've got some benches going in, a little bit of retaining wall, and improved drainage. The crux of this supplemental is when we opened bids back in October, all the bids came in over budget. We had to figure out if we were going to move forward with the project or let it die. We have federal money of $475,000 and another $800,000 in KDOT funds for this project. So the Community Development Committee actually awarded additional funds to this through ARPA. Because of those ARPA funds, KDOT required a supplemental agreement just basically outlining that, one, the ARPA funds could not be used as a city match and that they were required to be used after the others were exhausted. So that's all that this supplemental has in it. There's no change to the budget, and it's required in order to continue to get reimbursements from KDOT. So with that, I will open it up to any questions.
Super. Brian, looks like we have one from Jeff.
Sure.
So just trying to do some simple math. So $1.3 million of the 2.1 is paid by outside parties, and we're coming up with 800. Is that fair?
No, I'm not exactly sure. So we have on that 475, that's the first money that we get. We have a 20% match to that, so I think the total ends up being like 593, 750 or something like that. At that point, those 475,000 in funds from the federal government are exhausted. KDOT kicks in another $800,000. With that, we have a 25% match, and so in order to get that full 800,000, we have to kick in 25% along the way. That takes us to around 1.1 million and change, and so doing the math, 1.6 million and change, 1.67 I believe. So doing the math, I think we're around $400,000 to $500,000 of city money at that point. Then we can use all of the ARPA funds prior to using any of the city budget, so that's when that $407,000 of ARPA funds would kick in. And then the project was awarded at $2.26 million per the contract, and then we immediately renegotiated with them and did a change order and saved $170,000 from the original project cost. So.
I'm still trying to get to a number. So I'm going to count ARPA as our money because we can spend it on something else, right? Like streets. How much are we spending that isn't coming from KDOT or the federal government?
Without having a calculator in front of me, my best guess is around $800,000.
To upgrade a bike trail?
To construct a bike trail. A good portion of this did not have a trail there today. It was some sections. About 40 to 50% of the area had a 5-foot sidewalk. We're doing a 10-foot or 11-foot concrete shared use.
So some's upgrade, some's new.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, that's all I had.
Anybody else? Any questions for Brent? If not, Ms. Cheatham, do you have a motion?
I move to recommend to the governing body approval of supplemental agreement number 2 to City-State Agreement 135-19 for 91st Street Bike Pedestrian Trail Improvements, City Project number PR 2051.
Second. We have a motion and a second to approve this supplemental as Ms. Cheatham listed. So all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Aye. We have a 5-1 approval. All righty. And next item is, once again, Brent, this is the 167th Street, Schweitzer Road to Antioch project.
Yes, sir. This is for, as Mr. Chairman said, the 167th Street road improvement projects. This will be from Schweitzer to Antioch. This is similar to the Schweitzer job that we're about to get under construction right now for this year. It's going to be a complete reconstruction of the road, shared use path, sidewalk, closed drainage, improved profile, better sight distance, other safety improvements. During the design of this project, there have been a lot of unforeseen coordination that has come up. APAC picked up their site activities again. The Wilshire Hills development on the south side has required a lot of additional coordination that was unforeseen, and now the 69 Express project as well. Because of all of those things, we are working to get an amendment to and the supplemental agreement number 1 with HNTB for additional design services that were not in the original scope. The amendment is simply adding the required KDOT language now that they have in all their new contracts. When we had this original contract with HNTB, that language was not in there. So this new supplemental would be for an additional amount of $148,000 for a revised total not to exceed $1,097,590. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions about the supplemental for H&TB? Looks like Scott might.
So what are the unforeseen issues?
When we first hired HNTB as the consultant to do design, APAC did not have, they weren't out there blasting and redoing their whole site. They have since started their blasting activities again. They're totally regrading and reworking their entire site. Part of that is moving their entrance about 1,000 feet to the east. If you're familiar with the area, they had an existing berm there to protect against a pretty steep drop-off where they had blasted all the rock out. It was about a 70 or 80-foot drop. They're now extending that berm to the west, and then they're going to relocate their way station and entrance to the east. Because they own 25% of the property along the project limits, and we need to obtain right-of-way and easements, we worked with them to provide them the needed site distance should they still be working out there in 20 or 30 years, and this does go to the ultimate condition. Those are pretty large trucks. A lot of them are like the WB type where they have multiple axles. The site distance required for that is much greater than a normal pedestrian vehicle. Additionally, the Wilshire Hills development, while kind of in works on the planning side, was not a full go at that point, and so that has also taken additional coordination. The developer was promised to have full median access for the ultimate condition. That was not properly taken into account at that initial time, so we found that the site distances that had been initially calculated didn't take into account a couple of items, and so we needed to improve that. And then the 69 Express interchange now, because of the schedule on that, last I heard they were looking to hire a team in July or August of this year, and they're kind of looking to do that 167th interchange maybe sooner than later. So that has us had to relook at our construction phasing and how we're going to do our detours and all that stuff. The other part, some of this when you get into design, I'm getting in the weeds here a little bit, but there's Evergy substation on the north side of 167th. Our original design, which looked great on paper, but you lay it out in the field and you kind of do some more investigation, there was going to be major impacts to a giant duct system of theirs, and so HNTB did a preliminary cost analysis for us, and it was far cheaper for the city to install a retaining wall along this portion than relocate the duct for Evergy. The retaining wall, however, that kind of structural design was never in the original scopes. That's like another item that will need to be designed.
Well, you know, I think all your answer is very valid. I guess my big question is, and this is one of the things that I have the biggest issue with when people bring things in front of us that need to be done and we vote for it. And then it comes back, there's always an addendum, there's always more costs added in. And I guess my question is, why wasn't all this taken care of in the first place? We have experts in this area. They should have went out there and looked at it. They should have seen these or foreseen these issues. I can understand maybe blasting if there's rock and something that comes up, because I've been there myself, you know, dealing with caliche and stuff in Las Vegas, so you don't know it's there. But it seems to me like a lot of this could have been put in the beginning had we have done our due diligence. And I just got to ask, when is that going to stop, that we approve something and then it comes back later, we need more money, we already approved it, and now we're just getting worse and worse and worse. I've never seen where it's gotten better. But anyway, that's just my comment to everybody, is that when we give a bid, we need to live up to that bid and quit adding to it. Let's do it right the first time is all I ask. Okay? And it's not focused.
No, I understood.
Yeah, if you, Jeff.
So this is a sort of a logistical question, because this is out in my ward and pretty close to where I live. And also, you can take a look at the cost of these things, why we've kicked the can down the road, right? $10 million from 159th to 167th. But so there's going to be a roundabout at 167th and Schweitzer, correct?
Correct, yes.
And that is at the top of a hill, right?
Yes.
Are we going to have to do maybe that's what you were talking about, the retaining walls. Are we going to have to do a bunch of lowering that level so that it's, because that would be just so dangerous. I can't even imagine how dangerous. No one can see anyone coming from either direction, but
yes.
Is that a part of the project?
Absolutely. Yes. On the intersection you're referencing, that will actually be constructed this coming year as part of the Schweitzer job.
Okay.
We actually hope to get that going here in July. That'll be the first phase of that project. Generally speaking, that intersection is being lowered about 3 to 4 feet. That tie-in, as you can imagine, takes several hundred feet down each side of 167th. So we're going on the west side all the way to that first entrance of the Coffee Creek neighborhood, and then on the east, 400 or 500, actually 800 feet to the east on 167th.
Yeah.
167th is even worse. I can't answer this, but I guess it was made before me that the decision was to try to keep and maintain our thoroughfare speed limit of 45 for the ultimate condition. And to do that, as you pointed out, those sight distances are terrible on that road.
Yeah.
And so, we have areas that we're in 8 to 12 feet of fill. We have areas where we're in 12 to 14 feet of cut. So there's going to be a lot of grade changes out there.
Thank you.
Well, Ms. Cheatham?
Ready for me?
You bet.
I move to recommend to the governing body approval of amendment and supplemental agreement number 1 for 167th Street improvements, Schweitzer to Antioch, city project number TH 1914 with HNTB Corporation in an amount of $148,000 for a revised total contract not to exceed amount of $1,097,590.
Do we have a second? We have a motion and second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That passes 6-0. Thank you. And our last bit of business is a bid tab for Schweitzer Road. So,
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Brent?
As we were just talking about that Schweitzer job, we opened bids June 7th. This project was competitively bid with 5 bidders. Pyramid Contractors was the apparent low bidder, and they have submitted all the qualifications and paperwork that demonstrate their ability and desire to complete the work. The low bid was $10,092,799.28. That was just below the engineer's estimate, so it's on budget. This project, I kind of already touched on it. It's the same thing, reconstruction of Schweitzer from the tie-in just south of 159th through the 167th intersection where there will be that roundabout. Shared use path on one side, concrete sidewalk on the other, closed drainage, street lighting. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
All righty, well, we'll start with Jeff.
I think I've heard us talk about sort of strategy in general, electrical point here. So when you get to 159 going
North, it's 4-lane. So I assume what we're looking at is we don't need 4 lanes now, so let's not build them, but I assume you're designing it so that if we had to expand the road to 4-lane, you've got the easements and right-of-ways, and it's all set up to expand.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
Scott?
So because these were competitively bid by outside companies, this will never come back and say we need more money for the contractor. Is that correct?
I cannot say that, no.
I mean, this is exactly what I'm talking about. How many times does the city get a bid from somebody, and then they come back and they whine to us and tell us how, well, they didn't do it right, we didn't see this, we didn't see that, and ask for more money, and we give it to them. At some point, we got to hold contractors accountable for what they bid and what they do. And that's the only statement. I know you can't answer that question. It's rhetorical. Sure. But at the same time, this is exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, understood, but I'd still like to
just so you know.
I'm a stickler of a PM,
okay.
And I haven't been here all that long, but every project I've been on, I've harped on the contractors and knock on some wood here. All my projects have come in under budget so far.
Well, congratulations. I applaud that. I
will not allow any standard change order to come through.
I just think we need to be accountable for what we bid to get the bid, and we need to be accountable and come through with what we say. That's all. Okay. Thank you very much.
You got a question?
Yeah, I mean, Councilman Mosher and probably Steve, that brings, I think it's a legal question too, in terms of the nature of these contracts, which if they have a loophole there, which allows the other party to come and ask for extra compensation. That what I'm trying to say is that if the contract is firm enough, it would be hard to get away from it and ask for more money.
I think Lorraine may share something. Answer that for you. I see you're reaching for the button.
Yes. Our contracts, our agreements with the contractor I think they have strong language that makes sure that these projects these bids are submitted. They're based on the plans. I think we have a good track record of strong plans. We basically see our projects when they're bid, they come within budget. Normally, any change orders that may occur tend to be either if there was some necessary scope added that was not contemplated as part of the original plans. That is not something that we see often. Or there was some unforeseen circumstance that we would be able to say that nobody could have seen it coming. That is very rare. But we do have very tight agreements that make sure that we follow and the contractor is aware of constructing these per the plans.
Thank you. Lorraine, is there a standard of the industry that if we were a private entity, that I'm just curious to know, would we go through such change orders or, I'm just trying to understand if we are following a standard in the industry or we are kind of a little bit more lenient because we are the government.
I would say,
in terms of in terms of accepting a unforeseen circumstances explanation in the contract.
I can speak to our experience as a city. Right. I find that we don't see a lot of change orders with our contractors, and we really hold them to our design plans. Our project managers like Brent and Kyle and others, they work hard to hold the contractors to those bid plans. And we normally are able to resolve our way, and we do not see a lot of change orders. It's something that we really are proud of. And it's part of why we do such detailed design, and we really do put forth our best efforts as we're doing design. As you see in the previous item that Brent presented, those are things that are important for us to know now and sometimes add to our design to make sure that we do it right, so we're not talking about change orders. During construction, those are the most expensive. So I would say we tend to be a pretty tough crowd. And I think the contractors would probably say that too.
All right, thank you, Lorraine.
Yes.
Thank you, Ferris. I think Logan was next, and then Jeff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see some familiar names on the bid tab. Pyramid, I don't think I've seen as often. Have we done work with them before, and was it satisfactory?
We have. The most recent project actually was Tony Rome was the project manager for the bridges there over 167th, and he had a good experience with them.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
And Jeff, you have a question.
I just can't resist. And I say this with the best spirit of
But-
snark I can.
All right, you want a drum roll to go with that?
So, but I am going to say with a little bit of experience to address Scott's point, my limited experience on these changes usually comes from this body, right? We just talked about wanting to add trees to a thing that we hadn't talked about before. That's a legitimate thing to want to have, but sometimes those come in after the fact. The way our machine works, you guys are ahead of, we review it and change our mind, or we want to add solar panels to a building, right? So what I see is we change our mind about what we tell you we want, and hence we go back to the consultant, the architect, and or the bidder, because we change the deal, right? I don't think you change the deal. I think we change the deal. So I'm just going to have to say that.
All right, thank you, Jeff. Let me piggyback on what Jeff said. Let me remind everybody of the multiplicity of contracts that team has. We don't see the ones that don't have a change order. We just see the ones that do. The others don't come back to us, and they're managing dozens of contracts at a time. So we're seeing the exceptions, not the rules. All right, I think everybody's got, we're all closet civil engineers, so we're ready for a motion.
I am definitely not an engineer, but I move to recommend to the governing body approval of award of bid for Schweitzer Road improvements from 159th to 167th, project TH 1836 to Pyramid Contractors, Inc., in the amount of $10,092,799.28.
We have a motion and a second to approve this road improvement on Schweitzer, the bid tab. So all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. That is the last bit of business. We are now adjourned.
Thank you.